January 8, 2013, work session. Supervisor Vecchio, Councilman McCarthy, Ed Wareheim present.
Okay, two members of the council are late. They should be here shortly. Why don't we begin, Frank, with your report on Lawrence Road? Oh, I tell you what, Betty, you could sit there. Better yet, why don't we deal, Russell, with that land bank? Because I think everybody's going to be in the same, you're saying that's executive session?
That's an executive session item.
Okay, Frank.
I don't know if, I dropped it off last night, so I don't know if all the board had a chance to see the memo that I wrote on, they asked me, several board members had asked that we comment on the study that was performed by Baldessaro Associates. And I prepared a memo that I gave to the board. And in sum and substance, just to summarize it, there are two parts to that particular study. The first part is creating a new zoning category, which they refer to as industrial outdoor storage. And we concur that, you know, some sort of zoning between heavy industry and light industry is warranted, and we would recommend that we finalize that. And that'll take, there's a lot of detail that have to be finalized in it. And also, too, there's some uses we should discuss whether or not we want in them, whether they're compatible or not. But in general, we believe that that's the approach that we should take. The second issue was that of the zoning for the, how they...
Well, go back, Frank.
Okay.
They recommended kind of heavy and light industrial use there?
No, they recommended a hybrid between heavy and light.
Okay, and what did you say to that?
Well, basically, what I said was that the zoning is logical, that you have something of a space between the two. You know, that you have light industry and heavy industry, and it would appear logically that you should have something in between that would...
You mean not a category in between?
That's correct. What is specific about that zone, however, which we're going to discuss when we discuss the applicable aspects of applying this zone, is what should be included and not included in that area. And the big issue is what I see is how we deal with outside activity. And the reason I use the term activity and not storage is that there's no form of storage that's outside that is completely passive. In other words, even if you have it like an automobile dealership, you have movement of cars, you have cars starting and moving around and brake noise and things like that. So that's probably about as passive as you can get with outside storage. Other forms of outside storage potentially have more nuisance assigned to it. An example might be storage where you would have a nursery with that have materials stored outside, like sand or some other activity where you have heavy equipment moving around the site on a repeated basis, and that noise and the dust and whatever would become a nuisance. That is really the critical issue, or the distinguishing issue that we have to work out with this new category of industrial zoning, because the essence of what you do outdoors is really going to be the essence of whether or not this is going to be acceptable to the community or not acceptable. That's really the critical issue here. So we think that needs a lot more time to spend on that particular issue in terms of what we're doing. The second issue, which was applying for the zoning, what the applicant, or excuse me, what the consultant did was recommend that the zoning, this new category of zoning, be applied to all of the areas that are there that we put in the study, and that include Raleigh Farm, Correa's property, as well as Carlson and Jeswelly and the like. We question that.
Well, but let's do, I think at the last meeting, a number of board members were opposed
Yes.
to any change in residential category. Am I correct on that?
Up on that, for me, on the northern part, or the
Northern
westerly part,
Right.
I believe it should remain residential.
Well, I think we're all in the same
I
boat
think we
here.
are,
Yeah.
yes.
What basically was given in that report was an appraisal. That was the thing that, I believe all the board got a final copy of the report, didn't you?
Yes.
With the appraisal in it. The appraisal,
We just began.
the appraisal portion of the report really talked in terms of what potential values were. They really didn't answer the question of what's the real market up there, and that I think is an important question. And we had several reservations, as well as several of the board did, about expanding the particular use, and I think we all concurred to limit it, the zoning, to the areas that are either presently zoned light industry or that are presently being used for industrial purposes, such as Jazwali. 2/3 of Jazwali's property is residentially zoned, but we all know that that's basically, it's never going to be developed for residential purposes, so we would incorporate that particular area. What we're also recommending is that the town board, on its own motion, rezone the remaining property to cluster zoning, R21CL. The property is currently zoned R21. R21CL means that the property must be clustered, according to the town.
Good idea.
I would point out that the town board previously did this on another site, and that is where Holiday Management built the Hamlet, which is by the mall. You mandated a cluster. So there's precedent with regard to when we approach these potentially nuisance areas and what to do. So the sum and substance of what we're recommending is, first, let's go ahead with this particular zoning category and finalize that,
Well, let's go back, they just missed it.
okay?
Frank was talking about a hybrid between heavy industry and light industry. Do you have any concepts of what that hybrid would be?
Well, the key feature of this, as I was explaining before, is going to be what occurs outdoors. That's basically the difference. If you define light industry is something that everything is contained inside of a building. Heavy industry is where you have things that occur predominantly outdoors, like concrete manufacturing, asphalt manufacturing, rock crushing, and the like. Industry is meant to be, where they use the term industrial storage, is meant to be a hybrid where you utilize the outdoors but for storage. And what the issue is going to be with regard to outside storage is going to be, at what level of activity do we allow for outdoors? Because all storage requires some activity that be placed there. But let's say if they're processing materials outdoors, is that really a storage? If somebody, let's say, we had, what was it, the tree guy that was down here? Reliable Tree. They were mulching outdoors, and they were storing bins of material out there, and it was annoying the neighbors. It was not the storage that was annoying neighbors, it was the noise that was associated with it that was annoying the particular neighbors. So we have to work on, when we define this new zoning, what is really going to occur outdoors. That's really not in the report.
Well, is there a possibility we could do that related to the industry that's coming in? In other words, your outdoor storage usage would be tied to the industry that's coming in there, i.e. there's some talk about the solar panel manufacturer. He needs outside storage for his material, so the outside storage that would be allowed would be strictly related to what the business that's going in there.
Well, I think you would want to ask the question, when you store something outdoors, why is it being stored outdoors, and what are you going to be doing with it? If it's just passive, if somebody's taking materials and they're putting them in places and they're just picking them up and bringing them into buildings and doing assembly, that's relatively passive type storage.
Right.
If, on the other hand, they're assembling things outside and there's sounds of equipment and there's metal against metal sounds and things like that, then that really is what becomes the nuisance. What we have to be concerned with in this particular area, and what we're trying to do, is develop uses for which the land could be adopted for in this area, and that's what Lettieri is proposing. But at the same time, we don't want to increase the nuisance factor adjacent to the residents. If anything, we want to reduce it. So,
May I interrupt you? the current zonings there are residential and light industry,
That's correct.
right? So there's a western and northern part that's residential. Jezawali, we've already typified as being industrial because it can never be used for residential purposes anymore, and that leaves the rest light industrial. If you make another category, you're making that light industrial property more intense than what it is now.
Can I just say something?
Well, I don't think so, John, I don't think so. You talk. This is not a legal question.
Well,
Okay.
okay, we're trying to be realistic here. The problem is that it's not even being used for what the zoning is in place
Correct,
on
right,
that area.
right.
And we all know this. So the question is, what do you do about this? And we have limited options with regard to getting rid of them. I mean, in Carlson's case, which is now Highland, there's a degree of nonconformity with that particular site, meaning it predates the codes. So he could continue with things like concrete manufacturing in part on that particular site. Jiswali, on the other hand, and Lord knows what, the sum and substance of all the things
No,
that
but
has
let's
happened
stay
there,
with the
it's-
parcels, Frank, if you don't mind. We know we're all in agreement that the residential portions ought to remain residential, however you do that.
Mhm.
Jezawali is zoned residential, but is being used for heavy, light, what have you. And we all know that that's not changing, correct? No matter what you zone it. So the remaining is light industry, correct?
Yes,
Which nobody seems to be using,
that's correct.
correct? So if you make a hybrid between heavy and light, you're only going to intensify the zoning, intensify smells possibly, and you'll intensify noise.
I think what our strategy is to meet them halfway. That's basically, if you were to summarize what our approach would be, is we know we can't get rid of Jezwali or Highland in terms of this particular area, just like we can't get rid of a lot of the other users on the other side of Old Northport Road. What industry will permit us to do, or at least that's the theory behind what we're thinking, is to meet the developers halfway, to have a zone which we feel that is compatible in that particular area, and yet prohibit the things that are occurring there now. If you notice in my memo, I did mention, this does not address a strategy of how we deal with the illegal uses that are there right now, nor even if we adopt the zone, does it mean that the properties will be able to comply. But what it'll allow us to do is to at least set up something that's doable, that if we ever did have to enforce our regulations, at least the judge would probably say, you're allowed industrial uses.
See,
Well, is
not
it-
see, this
Frank.
is, if I just might,
How are they allowed to operate?
well, that's what, there are legal issues, that's, so Supervisor, I disagree with you about that. There are legal issues here, it's about enforcement. And one of the things that Frank hasn't addressed, I haven't seen this memo that was prepared, but the zoning study was done in order to say, what can we do to take these properties that currently are existing in violation, and have been like that for 30 or 40 years,
Exactly.
bring them into compliance, and the concept which is done through outdoor storage, which will list the proposed uses in the LI outdoor storage district, to see if you can bring them into compliance. And then we have a tool or vehicle within which we can seek enforcement, because there is a category that they can now look to be in compliance with. So that allows us to enforce. It brings us order to those zoning districts. And so the study requires outdoor storage, but it gives you about 14 or 15 different uses that would allow these people to find their niche where they can exist. And there's plenty of properties on that corridor that have outdoor storage, and it's dormant storage, but they're not allowed to do anything. There's no outdoor storage at all permitted in light industrial, and that's where the study, and with Frank's recommendations, is implemented, will allow this office with public safety to bring enforcement, say now they have a zoning category that
John,
they can apply.
could I interrupt for a minute? I realize I was late, I apologize for that, I thank
No, we
Mr.
didn't
Supervisor.
have any much before.
But I might have missed something here. Are you saying that you disagree with the idea of light industry with storage, and you want another category?
Well, that's what the consultant proposed. was a new category.
New
Correct.
category being
So-
light industry with storage.
No, it was industry with storage, not light industry
All
with
right,
storage.
okay.
It was
Industrial storage,
industrial storage, that's what he called it.
a new classification,
That's correct,
that they could come in and apply. to.
yes.
Okay. And you don't, are you saying that you don't think that's going to work?
No, I think, first off, I think the zoning is warranted. What I think the issue really is how are we going to get compliance with the owners that are down there? And that's what, I think what the focus of the supervisor's comment was what are we doing over there? Are we just allowing a further intensification? And I think what the strategy is to all of this is to first be somewhat realistic that the area is not light industrial use and it's not residential use. So we're allowing a category of a limited number of activities that we feel that are going to be compatible in that particular area.
Correct.
What John is saying is that, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but what he's saying is that we're allowing them a viable use of the property for things that are similar to what they're using, but not all of the things that they are doing, such as sand mining, sand processing, landfilling, and the like. And if they engage in those type of activities, we will have a stronger basis upon which to get compliance, because now the court will see that the property does have viable use, but they exceeded what was in the zoning, as opposed to what the courts see now is a complete difference between what the zoning is there and what the activities are.
Correct. Which is what the intent of us going after this was.
Mhm.
That's right.
And then, if they do come in to comply, which we would force them to do, we would have control via site plan.
That's correct.
And that was the whole point of doing this.
And one of the things that Frank touched on is, if we were to go to court today in our current situation without making these proposed changes to the LI zoning category, the
Right.
judges say, well, it's been like this for how long? 30 years, 40 years, and now you want to shut them down? We're not going to be successful.
Right.
And that's apparent. But with this, now we have a means to say to the court, here's a zoning category, they have to comply with it. And then the judges, I believe, will say, okay, we'll order them to comply with this or shut them down. And that's what you're looking for, really. This gives us a tremendous vehicle to seek enforcement over these properties, or give them the option to comply with the proposed zoning with parameters and a site plan, which you don't have on most of the properties.
And that's, the initial conversation was about that. How do
Yeah.
we get to that point where we, the board, can control what's going on down there via site plan? And my understanding was, this is the way we do it. Right now, I agree with you. They're all operating quasi-illegally, and we can't stop them, because there's nothing for them to go to when it gets into court.
But I don't think Frank disagrees with what's in the report. It's a question of how we're gonna fine tune it and just implement these
Let me
changes.
ask, what kind of time do you think, reasonable time, do you think you would need to complete going through it and then come up with some recommendations for us?
Well, I say put in my report a couple months.
Okay.
It's, what they presented to the board is a concept. I mean,
Correct,
it was
that's
there.
correct, and we always understood that.
Okay, and so if we're gonna legalize it, the thing that I think we have to end our discussions on, and the thing that's gonna take the time, is the nature of outdoor activity. That, I don't have an answer to that right now. We just got just finished reading the report of all the things that they're recommending, and I don't have a clear response yet to how we want to control outdoor activity. Because that's going to be the key to this particular area as to whether or not this is doable or not doable.
Right.
Certainly, we're going to allow things like contractor yard storage, for
Correct.
storage of equipment and things like that. But then you get into the realm of things like processing outdoor materials, and I think we are opening up an issue that has many
Well,
ramifications
those are
to
the
it.
uses that we may not want to put it.
Well, that's what I
And
want
that's
to get
fine.
at.
The athletic fields and those type of things may be a good use down in that area.
Okay, well, I think also too, one of the things that the board has mentioned was utilizing this particular zoning in other areas along Old Northport Road. So we don't want to make it so fine-tuned that it only applies to this area. We want to make sure that we may have this as a use
Correct.
that we could do in
To go
another
further
area.
west.
Well, keep in mind, industrial park is mostly all light industrial zone.
Right.
So that's one of the issues of the storage that was built too.
Well, but the storage we're going to allow in the overlay district is completely different from what we're
That's
talking
a different,
in
that's a whole different subject.
what we're allowing over here. I mean, this here, we're gonna be allowing, There's another issue which we'll get into when we start doing the issue is, and that is of what type of improvements are we expecting on the properties themselves? We just don't want to have outdoor activities as the sole substance of what goes on there, because they're going to be charged as vacant land, or effectively vacant land, and not paying anything significantly in tax dollars. And I think one of the things that the board would want is that we have this land developed in a tax-paying
Absolutely.
manner that's commensurate with the activities that are occurring.
So you're saying you need at least a couple of months to review that?
Yes, and also too, I may have to come back for the board with a draft proposal, because there may be some policy questions with regard to what you may and may not want.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Sorry, John, I forgot to send you this.
Do you want to discuss that matter? Well, I don't think the board is ready for it. No, forget the capital, we discussed that yesterday. The highway, okay, and you keep it general, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. John, if this board is on personnel, you check it out. Whatever he starts talking, there's no specific personnel, it's a category of people.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Supervisor.
Go ahead.
Town board members. I sent a memo to you this morning regarding maintenance at the, we have two highway facilities, one in Smithtown, one in Kings Park. And in general, I just wanted to give you some of the numbers. Again, there's 3 personnel that we have that are assigned to that task. The cost, their salaries plus benefits totals over $300,000 currently. And I have here the bid for the cleaning service that we use for I would say most of the town buildings currently, and that would cost a little over, well, say just slightly less than $26,000. The other concern I have is that these employees are paid through the through highway funds. It's a road account, and we've learned over time that the buildings that are on these facilities belong to the general fund, and those are general fund expenses, the maintenance and cleaning of those buildings. So right now we're paying for it out of the road account, and we need to remedy that. So we're in a position where I feel like we need to do something, and that was the purpose of that memo.
Did you all read the memo?
Yes.
I didn't read it, but
I
I'm
just
aware.
got it.
Okay,
It's a difference of about $274,000.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds absolutely logical, but we just got the memo this morning.
okay.
Okay, that's it.
Land banking is executive session?
The policy isn't specific parcels would be.
Okay, then why don't we talk in the general policy?
General terms,
Yeah.
yes.
Russell?
You want Peter?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Suffolk County is pursuing the creation of a Suffolk County Land Bank. This relates to tax delinquent properties. The situation is that there are a number of properties throughout the county totaling over 200 acres and approximately 50 different parcels that are contaminated, that are also tax delinquent. The current system is such that when such a property is tax delinquent, under the county charter, the county makes the other tax levying entities whole and ultimately acquires a tax lien against the property. Under normal circumstances, the county can take the property, sell the property, and recover the value of the lien. With a contaminated property, it becomes much more problematic because the contamination oftentimes renders the property worth less than the value of the lien. And the law does not allow the county to sell the lien for less than its value, or sell the property for less than the value of the lien, excuse me. In addition to that, when a property is contaminated, the county is reluctant to take title to a contaminated property because the law assigns a liability to anyone in the title chain. So a private party could contaminate a property, fall into tax delinquency. If the county takes title to the property in an effort to recover past due taxes, the county could find itself on the hook for all of the cleanup costs, which oftentimes can exceed the value of the property. The concept of a land bank is that under New York State legislation, the entity that has the power to take a tax lien can apply for approval to create a land bank. The entity can then transfer the tax lien, without taking title to the property, can transfer the tax lien to the land bank. The land bank would have authority that the county does not, specifically to sell the lien for less than its value. The idea is that the county could then move these properties into the land bank. The land bank could sell the lien to another party for less than its face value, to someone who would be willing to take on the cleanup costs, rehabilitate the property, and return it to the tax rolls. A key aspect of all of this is that once the lien and the subject property are transferred, the county's claims to the property are transferred to the land bank, the county is no longer liable for past due taxes and need not make the other taxing entities whole.
So you lose that end.
And there's a portion of this we need to discuss in
And
executive
because
session. because
they
it deals with
identified
specific
two
properties.
properties, so those will remain silent until we go into executive session. Okay? I have,
I guess, I just might, what's the implementation mechanism for this? We'd have to pass.
The county is the entity which must apply for approval from the state to create a land bank. I have been informed by county officials that as part of that application process, they are seeking resolutions of support from the 10 towns.
John, pursuant to Article 16 of New York State law, non-for-profit corporation law, signed into law by Governor Cuomo in July 2011, certain municipalities are permitted to create 10 land banks upon approval of ESD. I guess the environmental, not environmental, the economic development. Suffolk County is one of them.
Right, I know that, I wasn't aware it's gonna be talked about, today, but I just wanted to make certain that the board knew that this was just an adoption of a resolution to basically be willing to participate in the program.
The
Exactly.
county is asking for a resolution that also indicates support for.
Right.
Well, that becomes properties in question are subject of an executive session. I have 3 or 4 matters, personnel matters for executive session. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to touch on something that's been banging around for a long time, really hasn't been discussed, but we have a number of parks in the town of Smithtown. We don't have enough parks, but we are probably going to have less ultimately, because it's my understanding that at some point, Flynn Park will have to be closed due to the expansion of the cells up there.
I know at one point, when Flynn was first created, there was a town plan to expand the cells in that direction. However, I believe a number of years ago, the board did indicate in some fashion that that was no longer going to be considered.
Okay, well, that's encouraging, but we still can use more recreational space. And what,
Wait a minute, the landfills were banned. So,
Well-
with the plan that originated in that site was when the cells were filled, that the Flint Park would be transferred over to one of those sites, and Flint Park be excavated and made an additional landfill. But the landfill law bans all that.
The 1990 landfill law
Yeah, yeah.
basically prohibits,
so Flint Park will remain, as far as we
well, it will not disappear for the creation of a landfill.
know. Okay, all right. But I think we still are in need of parkland in town. We have valuable property, which we are all aware of, the Kings Park Psychiatric Center. And there is space which could be used for recreational facilities, which the town and the community really wants more than, they want to keep that mainly recreational use. And there's about 55 acres on the south side of the property, which abuts 25A and goes in down the boulevard as far as the circle. And that property is basically vacant right now, so it wouldn't take any kind of major demolition project or anything like that. There is a building that's being taken down, it's almost finished. What I'd like to consider, or have us consider, and maybe eventually have the town attorney contact the state of New York and ask them if they are willing to consider the transfer of those 55 acres to the town of Smithtown for recreational facilities.
Why would you have the town attorney do that?
Well, because.
We have
the
a
town-
state senator or a state assemblyman?
Well,
that-
it should all be done in conjunction with
Yeah.
the state senator and the assemblyman, but I would like to formally ask the state if they would consider it. And we certainly would depend upon the help of Senator Flanagan and Assemblyman Fitzpatrick. And I don't assume that this thing would be resolved very quickly, but I would like to start the process of trying to obtain that property.
Well, but I think the vehicle to do that, and I'm not opposed to that, is not the town attorney, but members of the town board. And I would say the town attorney, I have a memo here from Frank, where the town attorney is involved in the overlay district and the industrial park. What planning ability does he have, and why, and who assigned him to be involved in it?
I think I don't know what you're referring to.
I'll read it to you.
He has legal expertise.
Well,
that-
there's nothing legal about an overlay district.
Which,
And what, in Frank's memo, he indicates that, you'll hear, Frank? That was a recommendation to let the buildings go up 100 feet high by the town attorney.
Oh, no, the Hot Pot Industrial Park
Okay.
Supervisor, is that what you're speaking about?
Yeah,
Actually, it was myself, Fred, and Frank Rubio sat down and worked on it together, and some other.
but my question is, what are lawyers doing involved in the planning process? That's my question.
We draft the language, we work with
No, that's
planning.
what, you haven't even come to the language. You haven't arrived at that conclusion yet.
No, Frank Rubio's prepared a whole ordinance for us to
It's an
look at.
ordinance.
I have it on my desk.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just think that things are being done in town hall without the participation of other board members through the town attorney's office. That's my concerted opinion. When I read that a recommendation was made to make 100-foot buildings contrary to a planning design, not enough sewage, and you would, if in effect, affect the rest of the park because nothing could be built, then that troubles me. I don't know why the town attorney is involved in every aspect of this government. And that troubles me.
But I would just
No,
suggest.
no, no. What, Frank, you drew the plan.
No, but Supervisor,
Nothing was
Frank Rubio
proposed,
spoke
though.
at the Hot Pot Industrial Park about changes to the
Yes,
industrial
Yes.
park zoning.
yes.
Correct.
And based upon that, I was asked by some board members to work with
Ah,
Frank
that's,
Rubio.
that's the answer to the first question.
But any board, I'm
Okay.
available to all board members.
Okay,
and that's
no,
what I
I'm
do.
not, that's not true, John. And I want to tell you, I find it insidious. Did you just recently have a meeting on something that was a zone, special exception under a zoning? Did you have a meeting on that?
I attended a meeting.
No, that a public hearing was held? And any discussion about that that wasn't revealed at the public hearing shouldn't have been discussed privately.
No, that's, I would
Or I defer to, I beg to differ with you,
And
John.
actually,
I want to tell you, I'm telling the board here, I'm tired of getting documents or finding out that the town attorney is involved in negotiations or discussions without other board members being there. I find it deplorable,
but Supervisor,
okay?
I have to say you're misinformed.
No, I'm not misinformed. Did you meet on a issue that a public hearing was already held on? Yes or no?
Yes, we met.
Yeah, I was-
Okay,
yeah, I
yeah,
attended-
and
I
why,
attended a meeting.
yeah, and where, who was at the meeting?
Myself, Frank DeRubius, Councilman Creighton, and Councilman Ware.
And you think it's proper to meet on a public hearing, on an issue that had a public hearing?
That's not what we met on, Supervisor.
Well, that's
We
what
didn't
he
meet
just
on-
said.
We didn't meet on the
No,
public hearing.
It was a property that was.
No, you didn't meet on the public hearing, but you met on an issue that was related to the public hearing.
To ask Mr. if I might,
Yeah.
Mr. DeRubius had made recommendations on that piece of development.
Right.
The developer changed his plan to coincide with the recommendations of our planning people. And we were asking questions about the changes of Mr.
And
DeRubius.
the we being two councilmen and a town attorney, that all of us sat in on the public hearing. Why weren't we made part of that
Well, I did have to ask the
discussion?
developer that. He called
No,
and asked to
no.
meet.
And who did he ask to meet with?
He asked to meet with us.
Wouldn't it have been incumbent upon you to say that we have to bring that to the town board? Because there's a change in what they heard?
Well, the recommendation, it will become before the
They can
town
bring
board.
it to the town
All we were doing, the question, what was in question was, do we need another public hearing if you change it? And that's what we asked of the town attorney and Mr. Rubies, and the answer was, yes, you do.
Well, I would
So
tell
now
you-
that will come before the town board
Yeah.
to schedule a public
And I
hearing.
would think that that discussion required all board members and not just two board members. And it troubles me that the developer or his agent seeks out two board members to discuss it. Where's the
Is
transparency
that any
here?
different than a developer coming directly to the supervisor to discuss it?
That doesn't happen. And if he did, and if he submitted plans to me, I'd say, these have to be submitted to every town board member, and we'd have to have a discussion about it. It's wrong. The town attorney, and I know I'm picking on him because of who he is, there's too much involvement in the town attorney and town matters without the knowledge of other board members. And I will tell you one of them, and that's me. And I find it insulting and not good government. It's horrible. There's too much, listen to me. You could, I don't want to hear your excuses.
But there's no excuse.
I'm
because you're
venting.
wrong, Supervisor.
Did you
That's
meet
just
on a
wrong.
matter that was a public hearing?
I was asked by Councilman
Did
Creighton.
you meet on a matter that involved a public
He
hearing?
did. We already established
Okay,
that.
all right.
He did. We
So-
asked
But,
him to.
well, but
Okay,
you're taking
and-
it out of context, and
No,
I
no,
think you're overreacting to it.
No, I'm not overreacting
I
because
do.
everything I read is a town attorney, the
But
town
everything
attorney.
through this town goes to a town attorney's office.
Not in consultation separately with other, no, not,
Supervisor, I am available to you the same as I'm available
no,
to any other board
nonsense.
member.
I would tell you that if those people came to me with their plan, I would say, I will meet with the town board on this matter. I would not meet separately with the town attorney.
Supervisor.
Hold on, that was a public hearing, is that right? We had a public hearing on that issue, hold on, yes or no?
You're missing the point. I can't answer that with a yes or
We
no
did.
question.
We had a
Yeah.
public hearing on an assisted living facility opposite St. Catherine's Hospital.
Correct.
Now there's a change proposed by the developer.
No. With all due respect, Mr. Supervisor, the planning department sat down and revamped the entire project.
Okay.
And the developer agreed to
Fine.
revamp it, to make
Okay.
it fit better.
And the developer now revamps it and brings it to two town board members.
He asked us if we could have Mr. DeRubius look at it. When we did, we asked Mr. Zola to sit in, and the end of the discussion was, Mr. DeRubius looked at it, he went over it, and the decision of Mr. DeRubius and Mr. Zola were that it would require another public hearing, and the developer was
Fine.
told, you have to make application for
Good.
another public hearing.
Nonetheless, I still will stand on the basis that that matter should have been discussed with every board member, because every board member took part in that public hearing. It's that simple. And I'm tired of it. I'm truly tired of these separate meetings. And developers, he said, the developers sought them out. Interesting. Isn't that interesting? The develop, no, come on,
No, but
come on.
Supervisor, I actually, well, Councilman Creighton said, and I'm the town attorney, and I work for all 5 board members as well as all departments. But to hear you say that you never, don't have these meetings yourself, I don't think that's disingenuous. You know that's not the case, and it's upsetting to me because I was asked by a department head, but council members to come to a meeting,
Fine.
and I went. There's nothing wrong with that. Frank Rubius, we had a letter from an attorney, Mr. Gruder. We had to address what was raised in those letters. I asked Frank if those were taken care of. There's nothing being hidden. Everything is above
Of course it
board.
is. Why
No,
didn't
there's
you
not.
ask Mr. McCarthy or Mr. Malloy or Mr. Vecchio to attend the meeting?
I would never do that.
Was
It's-
that done in an office?
It was
It
done
was
in this
done in my
conference room.
town.
Was the public involved? They spoke out at a meeting, they went to a public hearing. Shouldn't
Actually-
they have been involved?
Actually, the concern of the board was to make certain that any change go back to a public
the
meeting.
public
because
hearing,
we
to
want
have
to make
another
sure
public
they hear
hearing.
everything.
Fine.
Correct.
I don't know, Supervisor, I'm certain you had meetings and discussions with persons who have
Don't be
applications.
certain about that, John.
Well, Supervisor.
Don't be certain
Okay.
about that, John.
Are you saying that's not the case,
Don't be
Supervisor?
certain about anything, John.
But it's
All I
not-
know
I
is
just
that
don't think it's right
continually
or
coming across my desk is the town attorney's involvement in almost every issue here, which never was the case.
In most
And I will
towns,
say one more time, that was the issue of a public hearing. And any discussion that was going to be a change from what was said at that public hearing has to be discussed in open, transparent meetings.
And it's going to be.
But it wasn't.
It's sure it's
It
going to be.
wasn't.
but I just
We
want
went-
you to
But
know,
it wasn't.
in
But
other
in
towns,
conjunction, wait a minute, John, in conjunction with the fact that the town attorney is involved in almost everything, in my view, from my limited point of view, I believe the town attorney should be involved in everything that we do. To
Absolutely.
keep us aware and make sure we're doing what's
Yes.
correct.
And I think if he is involved in it, then it has to be with all board members, not with 2 selected
Then we have
members.
to-
Well, we
Then
we can set that policy, that's fine.
That's not a policy, it's just good government.
And we have to have work
But
sessions.
But I just want all the
On a
boards
very
to be
regular
aware, in
basis.
most other towns, the town attorney's office drafts all the zoning code amendments with the assistance of the plan director.
That's why you were asked to come in.
And that's what we're trying to do. Frank and I work together well.
We're
There's
off,
never-
we're off target here. There was a public hearing on assisted living facility, and it was quite, an angry group of people, correct? A recommendation is to change it, correct? The applicant or developer seeks out 2 people, 2 members of the town board, to discuss the potential change.
Well, perhaps, with all due respect, perhaps then, the method should be, if our planning department, or environmental, or engineering, deal direct with a developer and tell that developer, no, we want you to change this, our town workforces should come back to the entire town board and say, this is what we're recommending on that project.
Fine.
And then
That's okay.
everybody's aware of it.
Well-
But I would lay the blame on our departments, no offense to any of them, but we're talking about a change, there's where the change should be. Because what I believe what happens is, the reason this goes on is because these people come in, they're dealing directly with department heads and bureaucrats, and this board never knows anything about it, and then they wind up not getting the project developed that they
And
want.
this board did not know anything about it
Well,
because
our-
2 of you met with the town attorney on it. And he didn't know it, and he didn't know it, and I don't know it.
We've done that, we've been doing that for years.
I don't think so.
I think
Not
so.
in a matter of a public hearing.
It-
And if that public hearing, listen, everybody's here long enough to know that when there's a substantial change to an application for zone change or a special exception, that it's automatically a public hearing.
And it's going to be.
No special meeting needs to be held.
Well, we
All
did,
right,
we
I
had
vented enough.
questions on the piece of
I've
development.
vented enough. I'm tired of all that business.
Okay, well, can we make an agreement here? That the departments, all of them, are directed to respond back to the town board.
Well, they ought to
That-
be.
Well, no, but
Before they
supervisor,
go
with
back
all
to the
respect,
applicant.
that before they even
Well,
speak
but
to the
you see,
applicant.
But what bothers me here, and no one's answering the question, the applicant seeks out 2 board members. Why?
You'd have to ask the
Why?
applicant.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, well,
I
ask
will.
them.
And why didn't the applicant go to the planning department and present the plans to him?
You'd have to ask the
I might
applicant.
ask the question, why wouldn't they come to the town board?
Well, yes, why wouldn't they? The town board, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Not to 2 specific people. And the town attorney takes part. He should know better.
Well, he has to
All
take
right,
part.
I want to move to go to
All right,
executive session.
we are off the path. I raised an issue
Yeah.
about Kings Park Psychiatric Center. You raised the question whether or not it should be Mr. Zolo writing the letter. I really don't care how we do it.
Fine.
I
Okay.
want to explore that possibility. I think it's a very viable possibility.
I will arrange a meeting
And-
with Senator Flanagan.
And I think it's something that the community would appreciate.
Okay. I move to go into executive session.
Second. All in favor?
I
Getting the position back into work session and
Yeah,